Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here wherever you are. We are excited to have our second installment of the U.S. Bicycle Market 2020 Report webinar series. And we have Jay Townley with us to present on self-service bicycle rental and how it can help bike shops. So thanks for being here, Jay.
Oh, thank you, Rochelle. I'm sorry. Good day to all of you. Some are in the morning, some are midday, and some are in the afternoon. So I am going to, as I've done with the previous webinars, I'm going to shut my camera off just simply so you can see full screen here. And as I believe all of you know at this point, my name is Jay Townley. I'm the resident futurist at Human Powered Solutions, and I'll be presenting self-service bicycle rental and how it can help bike shops. Now, this will be as factual a look as we can make it at self-service bicycle rental. Some of you know about it already, about self-service bicycle rental, but we want to make sure that you understand what we see as to both what it is in the United States, but more importantly, the future. And we want to focus on what bike shops can take away and use to improve profitability and grow their locally owned businesses. Now, this webinar is the second in a series of 8 webinars featuring each of the 16 chapters of the NBDA U.S. Bicycle Market Overview 2020 report. And for the pause here, I'm trying to make sure I get my system to work and advance the slides. Well, I apologize for that. Here we go. I guess it just took a little more time. What we're going to do is begin with an introduction, as you see here, including how to best use the NBDA U.S. Bicycle Market Overview 2020 report, which some of you just purchased and some of you are considering the purchase of. First, read through the whole report, all 125 pages. Now, this may take several mornings or evenings or a combination, but there are lots of up-to-date tables, charts, and illustrations. They should keep your interest. This is going to give you an overview of the current U.S. bicycle market and the bicycle business as we progress through 2021. Second, determine which chapters and data sets will be most helpful for your business and for your strategic planning. Now, yes, I am advising that you write a business plan for your bike shop business. It's an important piece of what you have to commit to as you go forward. Third, carefully reread and study the last 4 chapters of the report and extract the suggested business strategies you'll find therein for your review and for your consideration, and pick those that are applicable to your specialty bicycle retail business in your community. There are 4 key takeaways from your reading of the NBDA U.S. Bicycle Market Overview 2020 report. And this and the following 6 webinars are all about going back through and reviewing those and making sure that you're able to get them into a form you can use in your business plan. First, we want you to write down your most important findings from the 2020 report and this webinar, and commit to your own business plan. Make a commitment to your own specialty bicycle retail store business plan with financial benchmarks and key performance indicators known as KPIs. And look up the anniversary date of your NBDA membership and put it on your calendar to make sure you renew your NBDA membership. And finally, join an NBDA P2 group as soon as this webinar is finished. Now, I don't want you to think I'm just suggesting you join a P2 group because the NBDA told me to. In my history, I go back to working with previous NBDA executive directors like Heather, and I am very familiar with what are called 20 groups. And I like to take some credit when I was co-producing the bicycle leadership conferences when they were jointly done by the NBDA and the Bicycle Product Supply, what is now the Bicycle Product Supplier Association, that's been absorbed by People for Bikes. But when the wholesalers and the retailers were working together for about 15 years to produce a joint bicycle leadership conference, one of the things that we brought as producers to the conference was active interest in and explanations of 20 groups. Now, 20 groups come from automobile, motorcycle businesses, and also where I'm familiar with it, from the independently owned campground business. For years, my wife and I owned and operated a commercial campground in the Wisconsin Dells market. And the Wisconsin Campground Association, the Owners Association, actively promoted 20 groups. So that's the background. I know the value of these business intelligence networks that meet every requirement of antitrust law the way they're organized. And so the NBDA P2 groups are extremely important. Visit NBDA.com and take action to join this bike shop business intelligence network, which is what it is. And it can be extremely beneficial and helpful to bike shop owners. Now, this takes us to the agenda for today's webinar. And we're going to start with an explanation and overview of self-service bicycle rental, which some of you are familiar with. But I want to make sure that we take a look at it from the standpoint of all the aspects that have gone into it and are part of it now as it's part of micromobility in the United States. And why and how self-service bicycle rental has disrupted the car and helped advocates and bike shops in the process. Think of it, disrupting the automobile, disrupting the car, disrupting Ford, disrupting GM. Some of you wondered how bike and scooter rideshare make money and how they make money doing that. And we're going to explain how that works. And what the expected growth of self-service bicycle and scooter is projected to be post-pandemic and how this helps bike shops. And we're going to touch on consumer priorities and usage patterns, which have all emerged through the COVID and what we expect to see going into the post-COVID period, followed by a look at the technology and data collection self-service bicycle and scooter rental that has brought about micromobility and refined micromobility and how that technology is going to move forward and be of help to independent bicycle dealers in this country. And then we're going to take a look at the future, both at self-service bicycle and scooter rental, and also the bicycle shop as we see it in the future. And we're going to wrap up with a question and answer session. Now, this should look familiar to those of you, particularly in the big cities. Self-service bicycle rental, bicycle ride share, bicycle sharing systems, public bike systems, they're all names for a service in which bicycles and more recently electric scooters are made available for shared use to individuals on a short-term basis for a price or a fee. Many bike share systems in American cities allow people to rent a bike from a dock, which you see here, and return it to another dock, like this one, belonging to the same system. Docks are special bike racks that lock the bike and only release it by computer control. Now, you can swipe a credit card, sign up to rent one of the bikes, and all of that will work to get you to the point of releasing the bike for your use. For many systems, smartphone mapping apps show nearby available bikes and scooters and open docks for single or multiple bike share systems. The majority of systems collect data about the user and the metrics about each trip use of that bicycle. And from the standpoint of the system and how the system stores that data on a server on the cloud for subsequent analysis. And we're going to talk more about the importance of that data and how its expanded use has been part of it COVID driven and part of it by the post-COVID period and the thinking about the future. The self-service bicycle rental or bicycle sharing system industry was founded in Europe, and it is an industry. And it has rapidly spread in Asia. And it started to gain traction in the U.S. between 2007 and 2008. So it's a relatively new phenomenon in the United States. And we were the first country to see dockless electric kick scooters appearing on city streets. And starting in 2017, not that long ago, electric scooters joined self-service bicycle rental, and all were embraced and became part of micro mobility. Now, some of you may remember pre-COVID, going back to that period, 2017, when primarily Chinese-based dockless bicycle rideshare swept the country with 3, 4, 5 providers. Then how they came and they went. Well, the dockless bicycle self-service rental and scooter rental has stayed. So these other systems or dockless systems, like you see here, are where the user has or downloads an app that allows them to engage, pay for, and unlock a bike or a scooter using their smartphone. So this app, which again, you carry around on your cell phone or your mobile phone, also locks the bicycle when you reach the destination. For many systems, smartphone mapping apps show nearby available bikes and scooters. And there's even apps that will show you multiple brands of available rideshare bikes and scooters. They also show open docks for a single or multiple bike share system. The majority of systems collect data, as I said. They collect data about the user. They collect data about the metrics about each trip used by a particular bicycle from the system. And they store that data on a server or on the cloud for subsequent analysis. In 2020, 2 trade associations represented what is projected to be a significant part of micromobility in the U.S. Now, that certainly was disrupted by the pandemic, by the COVID, which we will touch on. But it's still projected, that is, micromobility, the scooter and bike rideshare portion of micromobility is still projected to become a $200 to $300 billion business by the year 2030. Now, as I mentioned, there were 2 trade associations. The National Association of City Transportation Officials, or NACTO, NACTO, which you could look up as www.nacto.org. And I'll repeat that, nacto.org, or one that is actually, we think, going to be much more interesting to bike shops is NABSA, the North American Bike Share Association, NABSA, www.nabsa.net. And again, I'll repeat that, nabsa.net. The last face-to-face conference that NABSA had was in Indianapolis in 2019, which I attended. And there was one large bicycle dealer there, a former member of the NBDA board, and he was in his community developing a both rental and what he thought would be a bike rideshare program. And he wanted to learn more, and he felt the NABSA conference was a place to do that. Now, the NABSA conference for last year was virtual, and for this year will be virtual. I'm assuming they will get back to face-to-face NABSA conferences when we get into 2022. But meanwhile, I would suggest that bike shops that are listening take a look at the website, nabsa.net, and also seriously consider membership if you're interested in your own rental and or rideshare program in smaller and mid-sized communities. And there are two NBDA members that I'll mention when we get to the Q&A session that you can also contact for assistance relative to setting up your own programs. I mentioned disrupting the car. Micromobility, of which the self-service rental programs are a part of, had already disrupted the automobile industry, as shown in this chart, and had started to disrupt transportation and transport by 2019, just pre-COVID. Now, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, it caused serious disruptions to the multi-million-dollar micromobility industry in the U.S. and worldwide. And we'll show that in a chart that's coming up. However, from the standpoint of disrupting the car, micromobility and bicycle and scooter rideshare offers some of the best city-based transportation options because they're the fastest way across town and can be parked just about anywhere. Now, go to the far left of this chart, micromobility. You see a bicycle and a scooter. And the point that's being made here is 60% of all passenger trips are 8 kilometers or 5 miles or less. 60% of trips in the United States are 8 kilometers or 5 miles or less. Micromobility in the form of human-powered and electric assist bicycles and scooters, electric scooters, are providing very eco-friendly last-mile solutions. And while there was a dip that we'll take a look at during the pandemic, the recovery has been rapid, and it looks like it will grow back to the same levels that we had pre-COVID. Now, the reason I put the chart up is also to show to the far left the bikes and scooters, the brands that are involved in micromobility, in providing the means by which you can solve the last mile solutions with bicycles and scooters. The medium distance is 5 to 15 miles, about 25% of the trips in the US. Now, the ride haul or ride share options there by brand are different and certainly more automobile oriented, but that's rapidly moving to electric vehicles. And then the long distance trips, 15 miles or more, where car sharing is now becoming a way in which individuals can make a choice to take a longer trip, but not be in the constant day-to-day ownership of a bicycle, or I'm sorry, of an automobile, of a gas guzzling automobile. And that makes up the long distance 15 plus miles, makes up 15% of the trips in the United States. This chart, by the way, is from CB Insights. So amazingly, this micromobility, 60% of trips in the US, is also why the recovery for rideshare and for micromobility from the standpoint of bicycles and scooters has been, we think, very rapid. It will be back to the levels of pre-COVID shortly, and in turn has a very bright future going forward and will take bike shops with it. Now this chart, which looks like a bunch of colored dots on a black map, this chart shows the locations of, in the United States, of the 350 docking station-based bike share systems with a total of 6,872 stations operated by 111 systems, including 58 cities that include dockless bicycle rideshare and 110 cities that offer e-scooter rideshare. So you can see what the spread was that hung on. This was pre-COVID. The vast majority of these hung on during the COVID. And so they exist and are now growing as we speak in the latter half of 2021. And we feel have a bright future to come back to the 2019 levels in 2022. Now let's start by taking a look at how they make money, which is the question here. How does bike and scooter rideshare make money relative to our industry and business, micromobility? Well, let's start by separating the system operator from the system supplier or provider. The bike scooter rideshare system operator is typically a municipality. It's a county or a subdivision of a local governmental agency, a city, or a university or college. And there are some large corporations like Microsoft that seek bike scooter rideshare systems for their campuses, their office campuses and work campuses as well. Again, during the COVID, most people worked at home, the vast majority, but those campuses are starting to come live again and open up. So the operator works with an engineer. The system operator works with an engineer or an engineering firm and probably a consultant to design and draw up the specifications, operating and revenue plan for the bike scooter rideshare system. This would include the corporation or the college or the university that would do the same thing. So they draw up spec. And after they put it to whatever vote they have to, make sure they got the financing for it. If it's all approved, they issue an RFB, a request for bid. Now, here's where the system supplier comes in. The system suppliers or providers, most of which are listed in the section, the second section of the U.S. Bicycle Market Overview Report, respond to the RFB and submit their bids. Now, this includes the companies like Motivate, which is owned by Lyft, B-Cycle, which is owned by Trek, Spin, which is owned by Ford, Jump, which is owned by Lime, which is also a large provider of bike rideshare and scooter rideshare systems. So they respond to the RFB and they submit their bids that includes, but is not exclusively for all of the equipment, scooters, bicycles, docks, or dockless systems, the hardware. This would also include the software, like the apps that are required. If it's hardware, it's the docking station, which you saw in a previous slide, and those are substantial. And the supplier will also provide backroom services. They will, under contract that's in the bid, run the rideshare program for the system operator. So the bids are submitted. The operator selects the bid that meets their requirements and seeks authorization to contract with the supplier or provider of choice. So the city of Chicago, as an example, puts out an RFB, the bids come back, they go before the appropriate authorities within the city transportation department, perhaps the mayor's office, perhaps the city council, I'm not sure, but they seek the authorization to select one of those bids and to pay that price for those services offered. And Motivate, B-Cycle, Spin, Jump, and a few others are the ones that are, one of those companies is awarded the bid. The selected supplier, who now has a contract with the operator, proceeds with installation of the system. They provide the bikes, the scooters, or bikes and scooters. They make sure that the app is up and running. They install the software. They install whatever needs done back room to interface with that system's ability to go to a consumer and for that consumer to pay. Most of them today are electronic cards of some form. And so they're the ones that hire the local employees. And what I'm saying is the supplier that gets the bid is the one that hires the local employees or independent contractors to manage and run all aspects of the system. And they also are the ones that have that are paid the day-to-day fees to run the back room systems that keep the system operating. So therein lies where the money's made. From the standpoint of the bicycle industry, there's only one crossover at this point, and that's B-Cycle, owned by Trek. And I might add, if you go downstream or upstream to see where the rideshare product is made, the ones that I've seen are in boxes that come from Asia from the Giant Bicycle Company, Giant Manufacturing Company. Trek may buy from other sources, but right now, for a frame of reference, going back to 2019, the rideshare systems I've visited those owned by B-Cycle or are functionally on bid, where B-Cycle has won the bid. The bicycles that rideshare bikes that are coming in are from Giant. So you can see it fits into the supply chain for the regular bicycle business. And in turn, if it's a motivate or a spin or a jump, that also moves back to the supply chain and into the plants that make these highly specialized products. These are not the same as you would, same bikes or scooters as you would necessarily get for sale in your retail shop. The main difference being they're loaded with electronics and technology that simply isn't required because you don't have docking stations. You don't need to interface with a backroom system or necessarily with an app, although that's coming into what we're doing in the bike shop to bike rental systems as well. So that's a quick overview of how bike and scooter ride share systems make money. Now, it's entirely up to the system operator, that is the municipality, the mass transit system, to make money on what they are charging per ride per mile. But in turn, from the standpoint of for the profitable piece of the business that's being measured and looked at within the industry, it's what the system operator, what Motivate, B-Cycle, Spin, Jump, and others are making on having won the bid, having installed the bid, having run the operation and continue to run the operation for the system operator. Now, we're going to take a look at expected growth of rideshare and micromobility in general post-pandemic. And this is a chart provided by McKinsey. So you can see at the lower left of the slide here. Now, to determine if and when micromobility and bicycle and scooter rideshare would recover, McKinsey and Company, well-known international consultancy, conducted a global consumer survey in May of 2020. So again, right at the cusp of the COVID. And that survey included more than 7,000 respondents from 7 global markets: China, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The goal was to investigate consumer mobility behaviors and expectations before, during, and after the crisis. The survey showed that the number of respondents willing to use micromobility in the next normal, that is post-pandemic period, and to do that on a regular basis, will increase by 9% for private micromobility and by 12% for shared micromobility compared to pre-crisis or pre-COVID levels. Given these trends, McKinsey and Company believes that private and shared micromobility solutions will experience a complete recovery in the number of passenger miles traveled with no significant drop from pre-crisis or pre-COVID levels. Now, the decline to micromobility came just as the industry was accelerating in 2019. And in 2019, a banner year, financial models at that time predicted that the micromobility industry would be, as we stated earlier, a 300 billion market by 2030. That's worldwide. So if you look at this very complex chart, short term is 2020, and in 2020, micromobility and rideshare, bicycle and scooter rideshare, dropped 60 to 70%, according to the survey that was taken. Lockdowns resulted in fewer commuting and leisure activities, limiting travel. Hygiene laws resulted in short-term shutdowns. And then using shared transportation was perceived as a health risk, at least in the early going. Now, remember, this was across 7 countries. So this would include, in addition to the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, Italy, Germany, France, and China. The survey also looked at, in the immediate term, this year going out to 2025, where micromobility with fewer points of contact and ease of maintaining physical distancing is considered less risky than other shared modes of transportation. And in turn, lockdown causes changes in customer behavior and mobility patterns. And as the chart says, more people try private micromobility modes for the first time and take longer trips because of the shift in use cases. And when we look out long term, out to 2030, and this is where, again, the recovery occurs and the global market goes back to its 30 billion with a B, I'm sorry. And I might add that McKinsey also feels it could be as high as a $50 billion industry by 2030 because of higher awareness of hygiene. Micromobility is preferred over public transportation. So what you're going to see here is micromobility providers, bike rideshare, scooter rideshare, are maintaining a very high level of hygiene and cleaning. Also, quiet and green transportation modes that avoid congestion and are preferred. You'll see this repeated in another slide that we're going to show in the shift in consumer attitudes and consumer trends. Consumers understand that bicycling, walking, electric bikes, electric scooters, rideshare, privately owned, are a quiet and green transportation mode that avoid congestion and are preferred. And lastly, cities decentralize and regulate private car travel while investing in bicycle infrastructure as an alternative. And we'll discuss that just a little bit more, although we don't want to get into in full-blown detail in the time we have with this webinar. I mentioned consumer priorities and usage patterns. People are now more willing to regularly use micromobility. This is a picture from Boston, Massachusetts. Why? First, according to the latest consumer survey, people are now more willing to regularly use micromobility. In addition, average trip distances could increase, as observed during the COVID-19 crisis, leading to a higher revenue per trip. In addition, higher awareness about personal hygiene and physical distancing might encourage consumers to use micromobility rather than public transportation for short trips. Also, cities are being encouraged by the current administration to invest more in biking infrastructure or even repurpose whole streets to incentivize micromobility use. You've seen this already in the press, where cities that are opening up and moving back to what they feel is a new normal are also keeping a lot of the temporary bike lanes that they want to make permanent, like the one we see here in Boston, Massachusetts. City of Washington, Chicago, New York are all opening up with more bike lanes, more bikeways, and keeping a lot of what were temporary bikeways during the pandemic as permanent bikeways and bike paths now, as they understand all of the benefits that consumers have become very aware of relative to the value of sustainable and noise reducing transportation modes after experiencing these quiet and sustainable noise reducing transportation modes during lockdowns. Micromobility, from the standpoint of where it's going to go in the future, might emerge as a leading option for riders who want to protect the environment. Now, the global pandemic has transformed the way people think about travel, including micromobility. However, given current consumer sentiment, policy actions, and the potential of upside, we expect the industry to emerge stronger from this crisis. And one of the clues to that, if you follow the League of American Bicyclists legal and legislative reporting, and they do just wonderful webinars. They just did one this past week on the bills, the transportation bills. And this is over and above and has nothing to do with the infrastructure legislation and funding that's being at this point negotiated between the Congress of the United States and the White House. These are the transportation bills that are adjunct to what's being argued about that are being moved through the House and the Senate. And what LAB has just reported last week is the Senate and House Transportation Committees have both moved bills out to an open discussion and for hearings within the committee structure so they can be moved to the floor. And both bills are chock full of things for bicycles and bicyclists and for walking and for advocates that previous legislation and previous law and the allocation of funding by the federal government for the advancement of walking and bicycling did not contain. Electric bikes, electric transportation, electric vehicles all have advanced in both the House and Senate versions, much to my surprise. I mean, for a governance that is struggling to work together, the big surprise has been what the House and Senate Transportation Committees have done in producing legislation that looks very similar, that is very supportive of everything electric and everything human transportation and human mobility, and doing it in a way that advances more money and provides more programs for the state governments and state agencies, to the point where the LAB is extremely happy and has said, look, the bulk of what the bicycle industry has wanted from an advocacy standpoint for decades, it's got in these two pieces of legislation. So I can't speak too highly of this as part and parcel of evidence of the change that's coming relative to the current sentiment that's obviously worked its way through the Congress of the United States, unexpectedly from the standpoint of what we see as the disharmony in other areas. Transportation is moving along very nicely in both chambers with very compatible pieces of legislation that should have little difficulty when they get to conference. Now, technology and before you jump all over this picture, those of you that are into editing, and tell me that this picture is reversed so that you're seeing the right side of the bike and not the left side, I am not sure. This is what Lyft put out in its publicity pack relative to a brand new bike they've just introduced to the rideshare market. And I think it very well may be the left side of the bike. Those of you that are into the bike world and understand the photography of bicycles, you know what I'm talking about, because the inexperienced agencies very often wanted a bicycle to look like this one with the front of the bike to the left of the image. And the only way they could do that and keep the nice chain guard and the colors intact was to reverse the image, which of course wasn't right. You were showing the left side of the bike as the right side of the bike. So in any case, before you jump all over this, let me find out if this is on purpose or not. However, relative to this particular bicycle, this rental e-bike, it was launched in San Francisco this month on June 6th. This updated model features a number of accessibility and durability improvements over the current battery powered bikes that Lyft, as you can see their name all over the back end there, rents by the minute in 9 U.S. cities. Now, among them is a much longer battery life. Now, that's good because that means that the people that are supplying batteries to the e-bike business are being pushed to produce a series of batteries with a lithium ion batteries with a much longer battery life. They have a lower center of gravity built into this bike, which is good from a design standpoint, and a saddle that can better accommodate smaller riders. Good. And there's no gear shifter. This rideshare electric bike has an electric motor mounted in the rear. We would call it a hub drive, so it's in the rear wheel, and has sensors, which we're used to in the electric bike business, that automatically adjust to the rider's torque, to their cadence, and adjust the speed. Now, there's a quote here from John Zimmer, the Lyft's president and co-founder. He says, and I quote, "We obviously learned a lot over the last few years," close quote. That's all good for the electric bike business and for the individual and individually owned electric bikes sold by bike shops, because again, these are features that the brands and manufacturers have pushed down to the OEM side, to the manufacturers, and it becomes more standard in the industry. Mr. Zimmer is also quoted as saying, "This is the first piece of hardware we designed from the ground up." And we took our learnings, as he calls them, and created an experience that is super safe, close quote. Now, you might recall that Motivate in the city of New York had some problems with brakes. And I gather there were probably half a dozen lawsuits that came out of that. Lyft, in turn, acquired Motivate, which is the largest of the providers of equipment, docking stations, backroom systems, ongoing maintenance of systems, and so on. So this is really good news from the standpoint of the overall electric bike business, because not only were those suits in New York settled, the equipment used on rideshare bikes has greatly improved. It could filter into the electric bike business, but more importantly, it means that electric bike rideshare will be safer and in turn will draw less litigation, meaning less bad press for electric bikes and bicycles in general, which inures to the benefit of all of us that are involved in the bicycle business, particularly bike shops. Now, e-bikes have also been credited with bringing more riders into bike share programs, which have, we must admit, from the rideshare program, and have said, endured a really rocky year in 2020. Spurred by transit service cuts and free commuter programs for essential workers, there was a wave of first-time users that came to bike share during the pandemic. And it included thousands of women who have been historically less likely to ride, either ride share or a bicycle. So here's another place where the bike ride share has been a catalyst to get more women on bikes, which in turn, as we get to the post-COVID period, will very likely mean more women migrating to their own bicycles, to their own electric bicycles. And we're going to see this historically low incidence of riding by women begin to reverse itself, helped very much by bicycle rideshare. So shared e-bikes provide a particularly popular with a motor involved, a particular mode of transportation for a big chunk of the population that had not ridden before, the first-time users and the returning users. And so this is a very positive step for the business overall. Now, this is a shot of just the instrumentation on that bike I showed you previously that Lyft has brought to market just this year, early part of June. A digital console is mounted on the handlebars. This is not unusual for what we sell in the bike share and the electric bike business in bike shops. But a digital console is mounted on the handlebars. It'll alert riders to things like local speed limits, which, by the way, are not built into a lot of the systems now available in the for purchase bikes, but will be because the technology obviously now exists. It also, from the standpoint of rideshare, it'll alert riders to out of bounds parking zones. And lastly, that bicycle I showed you is now painted with reflective white paint, like the kind found on traffic signs. So it provides an extra jolt of visibility, which I think, again, is a very great plus from the standpoint of what can migrate into the bike community and the e-bike community to make all e-bikes and bicycles and scooters safer. Now, it's got built-in GPS tracks, which again is common with a lot of the cycle computers on bicycles and also the instrumentation on e-bikes. It records the ride and it stores the data, which is, I think, going to migrate over to the bicycle business and the e-bike business as well. So just like the docking station systems that have been doing this for a long time, you'll now see these e-bikes that Lyft is introducing do this on an individual bike basis, except that the docking system software was originally designed to collect even more user and bike data than the docking station systems. So what we're talking about is more and more data collection. The docking station systems have been acquiring I'm sorry, the docking station systems like Motivate and the others that I showed you and talked to you about have been acquired by companies like Ford, with Motivate acquired by Lyft. So there's more infusions of capital. So their hardware, their apps, their firmware, and their software have all been recently upgraded, as we've seen with this example. The recent upgrades have included the introduction of electric assist and dockless bikes to establish docking station systems. And some of the dockless bikes have the hardware to lock into a docking station if appropriate. So you no longer have just docked or dockless, you could use either. E-scooters have all the technology that I prattled on about here that are available in dockless bicycle ride share. They have it all built into them. And they are also locked, unlocked, and made accessible through apps on a smartphone with the same GPS tracking and reporting functionality and ride share that the bike systems have. All of this data right now is going to be the subject of discussion as to how much the lifts / motivates, the treks / B-cycles share with the municipalities. They collect it in the back room, but there is an ongoing discussion about how much gets shared with the city of New York, the city of Chicago, et cetera, the operators. And I think that's going to resolve itself, particularly in favor of more data, more information about consumers and routes, particularly as the rideshare systems want to make sure they're serving underserved communities, and they need the data to do that. I think that's going to find itself opening up so that municipalities, cities, the transit authorities get more information. I also suggest that that kind of technology and data collection is going to migrate over to the regular bicycle business, and what we in the bike industry have available to us as more data to look at consumer both habits and activities, where they ride, where they ride, what they're most interested in seeing and doing, how they use their bicycles, and how we in turn could use that data and information to improve the product, just like Lyft improved the electric bikes that they're putting out now for rental in the marketplace. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up here. I'm very mindful of your time on a busy Tuesday. Human Powered Services and the NBDA Market Overview Report, we consider 2020 a turning point, after which dramatic change with positive results is expected. Part of that because of the legislation I just prattled on about, but it's quite exciting if you look at what the Congress is going to do relative to transportation. And the great tragedy of COVID-19 created an opportunity. We talked about this in our last webinar as well. It created an opportunity for American bike shops in their local communities, starting with what the Market Overview Report calls the Bicycling Relevance Index. For decades, the bicycle business has spent time and money in great measure on building and enhancing the perception of bicycles and bicycling as viable solutions. The black swan economic event and public health crisis of COVID-19 and the pandemic have accomplished in 6 to 8 months what the bicycle business has labored for and at for 46 years, since the end of the last bike boom. The surge in retail sales dollars and revenue are an added bonus. And as we come out of the pandemic to the post-pandemic period, the end of 2021 and going into 2022, it will be up to local bike shops and the American bicycle business to seize the opportunity and make the perception the reality of the future. So in summary, we started with an explanation and an overview of self-service bicycle rental. If you want a more detailed explanation, please purchase the NBDA U.S. Bicycle Market Overview 2020 report and look at that complete section, the one we just reviewed here. And we looked at why and how self-service bicycle rental has contributed to the disruption of the car and helped the advocates and bike shops in the process of that disruption. We looked at how bike and scooter rideshare, how those systems and how those businesses make money. And they make a lot, and they're going to make more. And what the expected growth of self-service bicycle and scooter is projected to be post-pandemic, and how this helps bike shops. And we touched on consumer priorities and usage patterns, followed by a look at the technology and data collection self-service bicycle and scooter rental that has been brought to micromobility and will, we think, carry forward to the rest of the bike world and business. And we looked at the future of self-service bicycle and scooter rental and our world as well. Now, this takes us to questions, but before I turn it back to Rochelle to ask if we've got any questions, I want to mention two NBDA members who I think can be of help to you if you're a shop interested in bike rental or bike rideshare. The first is Spinlister, Spinlister, Spinlister. I've worked with and talked to the Spinlister people over the years. You can look them up at www.spinlister.com, spinlister.com. And they in turn have got what I would look at as easy access, low cost, low capital investment entry rideshare programs. The second is Avocado Bikes, www.avocadobikes.com. And Avocado Bikes is relatively new, but they are involved in working with bike shops to get into locations, particularly starting on the East Coast relative to bike rental. So www.avocado, just like the avocado, bikes, BIKES.com. Ask for Ken, and Ken will explain to you how his system operates. And you can also go to the NBDA.com site to look up both of these associate members. Again, Spinlister at Avocado Bikes. So with that, Rochelle, do we have any questions?
We have one question right now. If anybody has any, put them in the either the chat or the Q&A section. But I'll read the one that we have is from Gale Force Bikes, and it says, bike share systems are mostly provided by government and very large businesses. Independent bike shops do not have the millions of dollars in capital needed to purchase and operate bike share systems. Do bike share systems compete with independent bicycle shops?
First of all, hi. And no, I don't think they compete. I think they help. Now, from the standpoint of can you afford a system? Again, talk to Spinlister, your fellow NBDA member, or Avocado Bikes. And they are two systems or two ways in which you could take a look at how you as an independent can get into that business. But if you don't want to go to rideshare, take a look very seriously at a bike rental program. Rent to own, a bicycle program system that's becoming popular with automobiles now among young people, where you don't own the whole bike. 5 people own it and use it on a schedule, or just plain old bike rental. I mean, I worked at a bike shop for years, pre-1966, before going to work to the Schwinn Bicycle Company. And in the summers, we had a really nice business renting tandems. So it was a specialty bike, but Schwinn made, as you might recall, beautiful tandems. And so we had tandems that we put in a rack out front just to do the advertising, and rented them every day. It became another revenue stream. And many shops, by the way, have found that to be true, that if even if they're not located on bike paths and bikeways, again, remember, we're talking here about an overall approach to self-service bicycle rental. And rideshare just happens to be a bigger piece of it that these million-dollar corporations have gotten into. And yes, that's big business, but you could share in that big business by taking a look at what you could do with bike rental And if you want to get into bike ride share, as I said, contact your fellow NBDA members, Avocado Bikes and Spinlister, and take a look at what they can do to help you as a small business person and a bike shop get into that business. Rochelle, anybody else?
I don't see any other questions coming through. I think once again, you were very thorough and answered everybody's questions in the middle of the presentation.
Well, as I also said previous webinar, I may have confused them too, but with that said, certainly we could do exactly the same thing we did the last time around. And that is any questions you get, Rochelle, you can pass on to me. I'll do my very best to answer them in detail. The folks on the webinar can reach me. Here's my contact information, both my email, which is probably the quickest, easiest way. If you want to learn more about Human Powered Solutions, there is our website address. So feel free, reach out. If you got questions, reach out. If there's another topic you want to talk about or respond in the Q&A to this webinar, I'll be more than happy to do my best to answer.
Perfect. We will definitely pass along any we get for you as well. So thank you for being here, Jay. Thank you for presenting, and thank you for everyone who joined us.
Absolutely. And everybody have a great day.
You as well. Thanks, Jay.
Bye-bye.